Good afternoon. I'm Mo Wright, Chair of the CMC Board of Trustees and President of Raymond Consultant, and it is so great to see all of our friends and new friends here today. Today, CMC and OhioHealth is pleased to present in our series, Our Healthy Communities, the forum Sitting is the New Smoking, Part 2. Please help me in thanking OhioHealth, our series sponsors, along with our sponsors for today's conversation, Mount Carmel Health Systems. Let's give them a round of applause for their support. Now, I know it seems a stretch to suggest that sitting is as dangerous as overall smoking is to our health, but that's exactly what recent research suggests. Our speakers bring a wealth of knowledge about and passion for our community around health issues, and I'm looking forward to learning why sitting might be the new smoking. So if you feel compelled to stand up, let's do it. First, joining us on the panel today, our cardiologist and founder of the nationally known Walk with the Doc. He is our local celebrity and CNN hero, Dr. David Sabgir. So give him a round of applause. Also joining us on our panel is the sports medicine physician and medical director of OhioHealth's Capital City Half Marathon, Darrin Bright. And leading today's conversation, our anchor for NBC4, Ellie Merritt. Ellie, the podium's yours.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I love this topic, probably because we've been doing stories on this at NBC4, and I think the first time I pitched the story, everyone looked at me like, are you kidding, Ellie? I'm like, what? And when you think about it, really, sitting is the new smoking. Here we know smoking causes lung cancer. It's so bad, it's evil, right? And then you have sitting, which seems so harmless. How could they compare? Right? There is a lot of research, as Mo just mentioned. Some of it is coming out of Columbus as well, that we know that it leads to a higher risk of diabetes, heart disease, cancer. They even have a name for it, calling it sitting disease. So here's a question. How much time do you think you spend sitting down during the day? 4 to 6 hours? 8 hours? 10 is the average. 10 hours is the average. A workaholic, now raise your hands, yeah. They could be in the 12 to 16 hour range, and that's because an office worker, average day, is about 10 hours, but then you go home and you're plowing through emails while you're watching TV and you're sitting down at home too. So let's talk about this. We have the pros right here. As I turn to our speakers, go ahead, introduce yourselves and share why you're so passionate about this. And let's begin with you, Dr. Sabgir.
Okay, David, and it's an honor to be here with CMC and Darrin. Darrin and I try and run with Darrin, but he's a lot faster than me. He's an incredible guy, so it's an honor to be here and with you as well, Ellie. We see in the office, and I'm sure Darrin could speak to this too, we see an incredible amount of sedentary lifestyle. The numbers nationally are anywhere up to 95%. So I look at this sitting as the new smoking, and my wife hates that, by the way. She told me when we were jogging this weekend, she's like, you know what, we had a walk with a doc this Saturday, and we talked about sitting as the new smoking. And we're about a mile into the run at the point where I couldn't quit yet and go back, where she goes, you know, I don't buy into this sitting as the new smoking. Smoking's really bad for you. And I go, okay, well, you're not invited on Wednesday. But I look at it as, you know, maybe it's not as bad as smoking, but it is something that we are now aware of that is causing heart disease, diabetes, death, and it's knowledge we didn't necessarily have until, you know, people like you were doing stories about it. So we see it as an opportunity to really make a difference in our patients' lives. And, you know, when you've got something like that and you have 95% of people where there's room for all of us to improve, it's something you want to attack with everything you have.
Dr. Bright?
Yeah, I'd also like to echo, you know, thank you for the opportunity to be here and be next to Dave. I don't think there's anybody in the country who's probably gotten more people out moving as much as Dave and his program. It's just an honor to be next to him and the rest of the group here. So in terms of my story, I'm a family physician. That's what I did my training in, did some extra training in sports medicine. And the day my daughter was born, she's 14 years old, the day my daughter was born, while we were in the hospital, I got a call from my mom. My dad had just had a heart attack. So raced from the hospital after my daughter was born, went over to Dayton, and sitting as my dad's having his bypass surgery with my brother at a table. And we said, what are we going to do to make sure this doesn't happen to us? And we challenged each other to run a marathon. And so for me, that was the answer, to try to get moving. And so I started running marathons, and that's my passion now. That's become a passion personally and professionally. That's kind of what I focus on, is running, walking, cycling, triathlons. And so for me, it was to get moving. And that's what I thought. I was doing all the right things. And so I'm trying to exercise all the time as a result of that. But now what I'm finding, we look at this recent research, how many people exercise on a regular basis in this room? Quite a few. And I think we can try to pat ourselves on the back and say, good job, we're moving. And that is great. But the newer literature suggesting people who exercise are sitting 30% more. When they're not exercising. And so we feel like we did a good job, so we can sit all day now, right? And now there's newer literature showing that that's not the case. It's the act of sitting is probably worse for us at this point. And we just got to keep moving. And so now I have a sitting desk at home, a standing desk at home, standing desk at work. And whenever my kids catch me sitting down, they say, Dad, having a smoke break? The reality is we just got to keep up, keep moving as much as we can, continue the programs like Dave has built around the country and the world. But beyond that, we need to look at what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. How many people have one of our Fitbit type devices? I got the new Apple Watch, and it beeps at me every hour. Stand up. It may be as simple as that. It doesn't have to be a treadmill desk. You don't have to change your configuration. There's newer stuff suggesting we can just stand every, a minute out of every hour. Just try to get up and get moving, get those muscles activating again. And that's really some of the key things. So we don't have to do major changes in our workflow. It can be as simple as just a little reminder. I think it just told me to stand up. But something as simple as that.
I definitely want to talk about some of the solutions out there, the standing desks, the treadmill desks that you can buy. But first I want to nail down here why. What happens to the body that we could when we're sitting, that we could possibly compare that to smoking? Why is sitting so bad for us? What happens to the body then?
Yeah, and the numbers are staggering. Those who sit for longer than 6 hours a day, and like you said, the average is close to 10. Diabetes risk goes up 56%. We're not burning blood sugar by even, it's a little work, as Darrin said, just by standing. Makes a big difference. My kid's school, our kid's school, they pulled me in the other day and we got to show you this classroom. They all have standing desks. And I don't know if Darrin would agree or not, I don't want to speak for him, but I really see that being the future. Standing desks or treadmill desks. It's just a way to keep you more engaged. As far as what it's doing, it's everything metabolic. So it's changing our blood sugar, it's changing our cholesterol, putting us at, of course, higher risk for diabetes, and then all the things that come from that: coronary disease, stroke, heart failure.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've even seen some studies where looking at the genetic level where, our DNA is actually changing, as we sit, it kind of shortens, and that's something that can impact all these metabolic processes and stuff like that. If you think about it, what do all the cells in our body need? They need sugar in order to do their different processes that they're supposed to do. And that sugar is circulating through our body. When we sit down, all those cells in the body shut off. They say, I don't need that sugar. So that sugar just kind of keeps circulating. And that's kind of what predisposes us to diabetes and stuff like that. And it's just what's happening at the metabolic level. A lot of changes going on that are putting our bodies at risk. And the shocking thing to me was even the cancer. And I don't know if we fully quite understand that, but a lot of all of our colon cancer, prostate cancer, breast cancer, lung cancer, all increased risk if you're a sitter.
Okay, there is juststand.org, and 86% of Americans sit all day at work. That's no break, they're getting up a couple minutes there, but really all day long they're sitting. And this is the tough part. There was a British study that just came out, and it said 2 hours of light activity. That's what we need to work in during the day. But how do we get that? Because there's this thing where you can't sit all day and then go work out, and that doesn't make up for it.
Yeah, when I talk to my patients, I talk about that there's two categories. There's, what we were talking about with staying active and being moderately physically active for 150 minutes a week. And that really doesn't matter how you slice it. If you want to go for a couple 75-minute bike rides over the weekend, you're doing just the same as the person who is walking or jogging or swimming 20, 30 minutes a day during the week. So that's one category, and that's still important, majorly important, even if you're sitting. But as Darrin said, the sitting will start to dig into that. So the other category of when we're at work, just like Darrin said, getting up for a minute, 3 minutes, every half hour, gets our circulation going again, gets the metabolic cycle, so it's a really, really easy fix. We just have to trigger our minds and realize that we're going to be more productive. That's the other thing, is there are tons of studies. Interestingly, most are Scandinavian, but Scandinavian studies where they are, they're having their employees work and their productivity is going through the roof when they take a 15, 30-minute break during the day.
And I think that's where technology can really play a role. Are there ways through the different Fitbits or even, through a large organization's IT department where it just blasts something to the whole system, stand up? And I think that would be a simple thing. I mean, there's some simple solutions to try to change throughout the day, because I know everyone gets engrossed in a project where, I got timelines, we got to get this done, but a simple reminder, and that's kind of what these different Fitbits can do. They can track your calories, they can track how many steps, and that's also kind of motivating. I can't tell you how many patients I've had that said, it wasn't until I got this Fitbit that, I have all these challenges, I got to keep up with my friends. That adds to it, the socialization piece, through Dave's program. I work with the marathon training program. It's kind of hard to do a lot of things on your own, but when you socialize it, and now you have a connection with a group, you have a connection with people, those relationships, that makes it a lot easier to continue those activities. And so I think any way you can socialize it and then bring it into the organization that way.
Real quick, these stand-up desks are incredibly popular.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about them and the solutions, because I think a lot of folks think, I like that, but then everyone's going to make fun of me at work. And you don't want to be that person. So it kind of takes one person and a cultural shift.
Yeah, so first of all, we have a couple of treadmill desks, and we absolutely love them, and the cost has come down dramatically. Like, they're 30% of what they cost about 4 years ago. Stand desks are obviously cheaper and very effective. We work with ProMedica up in Toledo, and they got anecdotally, they got a $500,000 grant to buy stand-up desks, and they didn't know if they were going to be wasting all that money. The demand from the people, the employees that were using them, was so outrageous, they got another $500,000 grant, and they still have people demanding. So they were doing what Darrin said, they're getting the email blast or the dog jumping on the computer saying stand up for a couple minutes. But they're very popular too, which is obviously critical.
And so you're a big fan of the Fitbit, but do you have a standing desk or a treadmill desk at work, or you're just bopping around all the day?
So I guess the other side, the sports medicine side of me, would say, there's definitely good literature we want to stand, but there's also some literature out there, there's probably an amount of standing that's good, and standing all the time may be bad too if you look at the musculoskeletal side of things. And so I like the variable height desk, so mine's actually called a Berry desk, not trying to promote one brand, but and it's actually one that can just go into a regular workstation, so you don't have to modify anything. It sits on top of it, and you can sit down and you can do your work, and then it has two little handles, and you click it up, and it stands up, and then you can stand for a little while, and then you can sit back down, so you can change that position. There are a lot that have motors on them, and so my one at home, I actually took my desk and I just sawed it off the legs and kept it there so it doesn't look bad, and so then I put the motors underneath it, and it just raises it up, and then it just sits right back down on the pedestals, and you wouldn't even know that I took a chainsaw to it. But it's, so variable height I think is a good thing, because I think that changing of positions is a good thing. Because, anybody, if you stand, I do a lot of sports medicine coverage. I was down in Marietta with Otterbein. I'm the team physician there covering a football game. Staying on the sideline for 4 hours, get kind of sore, achy. So let's mix it up a little bit too.
You guys are both on the front lines of getting people to move in a big way. I mean, Dr. Bright, you're with the Columbus Marathon. Dr. Sabgir, you've launched Walk with the Doc. That's gone gangbusters right now. What kind of a difference do you see in patients when you do get them moving? And sometimes it's small steps, but sometimes you see huge improvement.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things I just love about the program. And the program that started with 91 people, that's now over 1,400 people training for marathons and half marathons every year. It's a wonderful thing, and a lot of people join the program. They've expanded into kind of more momentum. They call it a momentum program. People are just trying to get moving. People who, the thought of running a marathon, I just want to get moving. And so a 5K race. So they're training for 5K races, and a lot of those people, see all the benefits. They like the excitement of the group, and then they say, maybe I can do this marathon or half marathon. And so they kind of migrate through the program, and we've seen people lose 100 pounds. I've had patients that take them off all their medicines, just pulling off blood pressure medicines, pulling off the diabetes medicines, and they're able to really treat their medical conditions through exercise. The other thing that we look at is mental health. I can't tell you how many people run for mental health. There are excellent studies showing that just exercise is as effective as most of our antidepressants and anti-anxiety medicines. And so, we can get rid of some of those medicines. And so I have a lot of patients, the first thing I do when I talk to them about anxiety and depression isn't necessarily medicine. What are we doing for exercise? And can we commit to that over the next 2 weeks and sit down and see how you're doing?
Yeah, I agree with everything Darrin said. In addition, with the sitting, there's a study with 3,000 women showing a strong increase in major depression in women who sat longer, 6 hours or more a day. So that's another great, that's an opportunity where we can really affect lives at zero cost. I could talk about how much time do we have. I could talk about the walk until our spouses were calling us to come home for dinner. But we, and our team is here, Rachel and Jessica, and we absolutely love it to death. It's been a gift to us. To us, if the doc's a hook tool to get the patient or the community member out, we want to capitalize on that and use that to get people out, but it's really the camaraderie, the friendships that develop all around at all these sites that keep people coming back. They're holding each other accountable. And then, we've talked about walking being the miracle drug, the fountain of youth. It really is the cure. I mean, we've got something that can cure 80% of cardiovascular disease, breast cancer, lung cancer. I never would have thought that until a couple years ago. Dramatic drops in colon cancer, depression, anxiety, osteoporosis. There's over 40 diseases. So when you've got one pill, if you will, that can do all that and not at 5, 7, 8%, but at 50, 70, 80%, it seems like we should be focusing so much effort on taking care of that first. And do we need drug-eluting stents and PCSK9, the new cholesterol drug? Yeah, we do, unfortunately. But I would lobby that we allocate all our resources, or so many of our resources, towards preventing and making people aware of that. Because we really have the cure right now.
Let's talk about the kiddos for a second, because we're parents here, and I think we've been talking about childhood obesity for a while now. That there about a third of American kids are overweight or obese. Childhood obesity has more than doubled in children, quadrupled in adolescents in the past 30 years. So the big worry there are the health problems that come along with that. I'm just a mom, and I go home and I see the kiddos on the Kindle, and it's a tough thing to get them moving. And so we just took away the Kindle. Didn't solve the problem, though. And but for all those parents who are trying to get their kids, get them moving and trying to protect their health for when they're adults, what do you see that's working?
So Darrin's the family medicine guy, so I'm going to let him go first, and then I'll just agree with what he said. Out of respect of the family medicine doc, I'm going to let Darrin go.
Well, I think it comes down to the family unit, making it part of the family, so that they see that it's important to do. Just like, we have dinner as a family every night together. So, a lot of their dietary habits are, what we're putting on the table in front of them instead of, grabbing a meal and going and sitting in front of the TV that a lot of people do. And so I think we need to kind of focus back on that. And so the family needs to go on a walk together. The family needs to go on a bike ride together and make activities that are fun for the family, that are around fitness and moving. And I think, the reality is, I think as parents, we all struggle with this. I mean, there needs to be limits on screen time, and, the more screen time people have, the more they're going to be sitting. And so I think we just got to find ways, positive ways, to promote fitness within the family and the community. I mean, there's some great programs out there. With the Girls on the Run, and a lot of programs that are kind of grassroots, working in some of the schools, trying to get girls running with their moms after school, and a lot of neat programs. And I think now they're starting with some other programs very similar to that in a lot of the different communities. So some wonderful programs out there, but we just need to continue to promote fitness.
So culture within the family, too, just as it might be a cultural shift at work, it has to start with mom and dad at home, too.
So I agree with Darrin, but I have one other thing to add. How many people are familiar with the concept of walkability? Okay, so not totally widely known, and that's a good thing because it's something that's going to be coming up more and more. The CDC, you guys probably know, the Surgeon General came out with this call to action on walking and walkability. So walkability basically means you can walk to your grocery store. You have these built infrastructures. And I think that's going to be such an important component. And as far as kids, we encourage, like we have a CVS that's walkable to our house, so try and encourage them to go, do that and make purposeful trips. Not all our communities are walkable, and a lot of us want communities that are much more walkable. So what we're trying to do is, try and modify that. So we'll try and come up with trips or little errands to make that happen. One of the interesting byproducts in our school district, Darrin and our kids are in the same school district. They just failed, the levy failed, about a year ago. So one of the things was they cut, if I understand right, they cut bus routes by, if you were within 2 miles, you had to find a way to get to school. So this, all these parents are talking about, how are we going to do this? And now in the morning, all these beautiful days, these kids are biking, they're walking to school. It's been the most fantastic, failure. It's, totally separate from the levy, and that's important. But I think that's a great example of what we need to do.
Dr. Bright, you mentioned your father's heart attack being a catalyst for you and your brother to change. And I can see that, and that makes sense. That a lot of people get in those positions, and that's what it takes. Not that you weren't perfectly healthy before that, but I think a lot of people will come to this, and then we go back to work, and nothing changes. Mm-hmm. So, what can we do to get that inspiration behind us?
Yeah, and that's one thing I was going to say is, don't make it an event like I had to make that change. And so how can everybody start to incorporate that now? And it is a challenge. And I think oftentimes in my practice, a lot of people that maybe aren't active, aren't running, aren't walking, and they see me, who runs a lot of marathons, and they think, well, I could never do that. And I think if we think about that, not everyone needs to run a marathon. Not everyone needs to run a half marathon. We don't even need to run a 5K. We don't need to run. We just need to walk. We just need to start the process. And I think if we could just do it in small little pieces, just look at, what am I doing now? Would it be possible just to add this little piece in? And I think if we do it piece by piece, you'll find that it's very easy to incorporate into your life. Dr. Sabgir mentioned the American College of Sports Medicine recommendations of trying to get 2.5 hours of exercise in a week. And it doesn't have to be running. It doesn't have to be riding. It can just be walking with your family, broken up however it fits into your week. And if that's too much, just start with an hour. Say, next week I'm going to commit to an hour. And my goal is by 6 months, I want to get to that goal of 2.5 hours a week. So don't make it too big, because then we set ourselves up for failure. We want to be successful. We want to build on those successes and take it step by step.
Rachel, we need to get that on tape and put on the website, run it on loop.
What's the prescription? I mean, here we have two of the best docs in our city, and I'm not going to let you leave without giving us a prescription. So do we sit for, if we're sitting for 2 hours, do we get up for 15 minutes? Is it working out 30 minutes in the evening? How much time? What should we be getting in?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And what I recommend to our patients is 150 minutes a week. And I think if that sometimes may be hard to measure. And if you're not there yet, and a lot of our patients aren't, then work on improving. Darrin taught me with running a long time ago, improving it 10% a week. So working, if they're at 90 minutes now, be at 99 the next week, and pretty soon you'll be there. So that's part of it, and working towards that 150, and that's the one category. The other category you could tackle two ways. I tell our patients, ever since the stuff came out, 3 minutes every hour, if you can get up,
okay,
or a couple minutes every 30, just to, I spend a lot of the day reading echoes and stress tests. It's pretty easy when you're done, just get up, go get a glass of water, something like that. So that's very easy, then you don't worry about it. The other foolproof way is with a Fitbit or a pedometer, any kind, to shoot for 10,000 steps a day. We've all heard that. That way you don't really have to think about it. But if you're getting 10,000 steps a day, you're really getting the job done. And then, I just don't like to kill it with science. I don't know if it's any harder than that.
What about the diet, though? Because we're talking about sitting being the new smoking, but truthfully, smoking is just plain, it's on its own little island as far as health hazards. Let's bundle all the good stuff together that goes along with walking, because it's not just by itself. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's our first challenge. And sometimes I think if we try to make too many changes at once, it can be too much. But at the same time, if our diet is an area that we can work on, I think that can be very helpful. Making sure that it's a balanced diet. There are a lot of people who say, well, what diet should I follow? Should I do this diet, this diet, this diet? No, it just needs to be healthy. Let's go to kind of just the basic food groups. Let's look at, a plant-based, not completely, it doesn't have to be vegetarian, but, kind of plant-based type diet that has a lot of the fruits and the vegetables. We're so afraid of fats anymore. There are good fats out there. We need to make sure that we're getting those. I'm sure Dr. Sabgir can talk a lot about that as well. But definitely, I think it's everything. We want to look at everything at once. But again, don't make it too much at first.
Okay.
Real quick, Michael Pollan came and spoke in town recently, and I love his thing, and this is what we share with our patients. It's 7 words: eat food, not too much, mostly plants, which is exactly what you're saying, and gets us out of an office visit a lot quicker. Although my bosses are here, we always spend the appropriate amount of time. But I'm all about being simple, and it's really simple. Just like Darrin said, when you eat food, you're eating foods that your grandparents would recognize as foods. Not too much. These blue zones where, the people live to 105 and then die in their sleep after a fantastic life, they're eating 75 to 80% of their meal, and mostly plants.
Of all the research that's out there, and I know you two are immersed in this because a new study pops up and your ears perk up and you're on the front lines, what really strikes you the most about the research we are learning now about the dangers of sitting?
I think it's just its overall impact. Dave was saying, certain drugs come out and we think we've achieved success if maybe we have a 10% improvement. But when you look at the numbers and how dramatic they are and how simple the intervention is, it just seems like, I have some patients that come to me now and they say, hey, would you mind writing this order for a standing workstation? And I think actually we probably need to flip that around. I need to be writing orders of why someone should be sitting all day. Otherwise, it should be an expectation that we're all standing. And until we change that in the workplace, I think it's going to be challenging because, people realize they're hearing this and they're trying to fight with their employers to get these workstations and know that they're sitting all day. And I think now we need to almost reverse that and look at it, how can we put the pressures on the insurance companies and our employers to allow for more healthy lifestyles. And I think people are getting it.
There was a great study with children that was out recently. I think it just came out 2 weeks ago, and it was interesting because it was such a small study. But they looked at 36 kids for a period of 12 weeks, and they had one group sit with their Kindle for 3 hours at a time, or do whatever they could. They were allowed to get up, but they weren't encouraged to do so. And the other group was encouraged to get up for a few minutes every half hour and go around. And they checked the blood work at the end of 12 weeks. So very small group, very short time period. And there was a 30% reduction in every single thing they measured in the group that was up and moving. So hemoglobin A1C is something we look to measure how well diabetes is controlled, their blood sugar. The only thing that didn't change was triglycerides, which you wouldn't really expect it to change. So I think the big thing here is that it's almost like someone's trying to whack us on the head saying, don't you guys get it? That, walking treats 40 plus diseases, sitting causes probably, by the time they're done looking at it, 40 plus diseases. Just get up and move, and that's it. It's really easy.
Maybe that's the next step for the Walk with a Doc program, is you actually whack them on the head.
Did you get that? Did you take that note? Our liability insurance is going to go through the roof, but thank you, Ellie. We'll take that.
We're going to have questions from the audience here in just a minute, so go right ahead and line up, and we'll take questions as they come. One final question. If sitting really is this new smoking, and we have much tighter controls and legislation and regulations around smoking today, do you see a time, and you kind of hinted at this, Dr. Bright, that where we're going to require changes in the workplace or schools?
Sure. Absolutely. I mean, I think employers are starting to realize as they're carrying more and more of the burden of healthcare costs, that they need to incentivize their employees to be living healthier lifestyles. I've seen that in the OhioHealth. We do biometrics every year where we look at our cholesterol, we look at our pressure. Well, this is the first time we're looking at it and we're saying, well, what did they look like that last year? And what do they look like this year? And that may influence how you pay for your insurance. Have you made those improvements? Or are we just tracking numbers to track numbers? And so I think we're going to see more of that. And I think it's the responsibility of everybody, whether it's the employer or the employee and the associates, to be active in that process. And so I think there will be a lot there.
Great. Do we want to start with questions? Yeah, go right ahead.
So I came with my question already in mind, and you've spoken to it a little, Dr. Bright, but I still want to ask. I came away from phase one of this, all fired up, went back, set up the standing desk. I've been doing it ever since, and it's great about 90% of the time. There are days when I have a lot of computer work to do, when I'm really standing there glued to my workstation, that by the time I break for lunch, my back is so stiff I can barely bend over to pick up my purse. And just to add, I work for a nonprofit, so like running out and buying different furniture is probably not going to happen in the near future. My standing desk is done with boxes and popcorn tins. So any advice on how to handle those days?
Well, that's exactly how I started. I took my inbox that used to hold charts, and we went to an electronic record, so I had all these things sitting around. I stacked them all up on top of each other, and that's how I started as well. So you don't have to invest a lot. You can just look around the office and see what's going to work. But I think it goes to the point of making sure you're changing your position. The change in position is good. Being in the same position all the time isn't a good thing. And so we want to move up, we want to move down, make sure we are adjusting that throughout the day. I think that would help. And then also, I see it all the time, and kind of the parallel would be people who have never run before, and they decided they want to start training for a 5K, and we have some shin splints along the way. We might have some aches and pains. Well, as we're adjusting to new body positions at work, we may feel some of that. And so I think, you know, as long as it's not persisting, we can change our position and starting to get better. Maybe there'll be a little discomfort that you can work through. If not, obviously there's a lot that we can do, you know, in terms of some different exercises, maybe perhaps physical therapy or something like that. And there may be obviously some conditions that people have that may prevent them from standing all day. And that's understandable. But if we can just change positions, I think is going to be the key part of it.
Thanks.
Yeah, welcome. Go right ahead.
I'm Cookie McIntyre. I really didn't have a question. I just wanted to stand out. No. No, I do have a question.
That's the best one.
I do have a question. You know, there are some people, I live with one, that just cannot sit still for a second. Sit too long, got to get up, got to move. And then there are other people that can sit for their lives. Is there any kind of research that show that people are genetically predisposed to really feeling that they want to sit or move? And I wondered if that has anything to do with how people are motivated in order to move.
That's a great question.
Yeah, happy to. I'm not sure of any research with, you know, that being on our DNA, but we definitely all, some of us are, you know, we have parasympathetic, sympathetic fibers. Some of us have yin, some of us have yang, and if you're maybe a little more predisposed to be, and by the way, that person is going to do well long term as far as their metabolism is going to be higher. So there may be other things associated with it. I'm not saying anxiety, but just a restlessness. I'm not aware of any research with it on DNA, and if you say there are, I'm going to be really upset because you're going to make me look fool.
No, I haven't heard of anything either. But I do find that, you know, they're just like everyone I think knows within their, you know, work group, coworkers, friends, family. They're just different personality types. And I think there's some people that might be, you know, a little bit more intense, hyper-functioning. There's some people that are a little bit more laid back. And I think, you know, we see that, and it probably has parallels with what you're asking.
Well, thank you for being here. I'm Jane Scott. After the first version of this, I also got a Varidesk, and I really like it a lot. And I also have back pain and knee pain, but you know, I like moving around and stuff. My question to you is, it's great. We've had speakers talk about this. How prevalent is your theory, or is this research in the whole medical community? Because you know, the docs that I go to are still talking about, oh, you need to get that workout in a day. I'm not a worker-outer. I'm a worker in the garden. I grew up on a farm, and the idea of going to a gym and working out is just the most ridiculous thing you could ever think of. Okay, so, you know, getting the movement and things in, are the doctors telling people this kind of stuff you are? Is that prevalent in the medical community, or are you guys at the beginning of this movement?
No, I think it definitely, the message is getting through. But as with anything, it can take a while to be disseminated. And part of it is, I think we're waiting, you know, a lot of times in the medical profession, we're waiting for an exact prescription. You know, what is the right dose of standing? What is the right dose of sitting? And there are obviously a lot of studies that are ongoing, and so I think that's part of it. But then the other thing I would say is maybe just the way you think about exercise too, because I want to go back to that just for a second, is that it doesn't have to be running, sprinting. It can just be walking the dog around the block, something like that. Because, you know, right now, sitting is the new smoking. That's the excitement. It's cool. It's very fashionable. But at the same time, it's been around for a long time. In the 1950s in Britain, they did a study looking at the double-decker buses. And they had the driver and they had the conductor who went around and took everybody's money, and he was walking. And they found that the the driver had heart attacks twice as likely as the conductor. And so that was the first time they realized that sitting is probably not good for you. So it's been around a long time, and now it's kind of come back around. Everything's new again. Same time, you know, exercise, you know, we have some excellent studies showing that exercise is just as important when we look at this. And so there is the standing piece, but there's also the exercise piece. And they looked at studies with people with 3 or more risk factors for heart disease and found, are you exercising? Then they looked at people with no risk factors for heart disease and asked them that same question. And then just breaking that very simple study down into 2 groups. The people who weren't exercising but had no risk factors for heart disease. Those are people we always gave a pass to. You know, your blood pressure's great. You know, your weight looks good. You don't have high cholesterol. Then they looked at the people who had 3 or more risk factors, but they were exercising. Guess which group had less heart disease? the group with 3 or more risk factors but were exercising. And that group included smoking. And so the choosing not to exercise is about as bad as choosing to smoke. So we can go back to kind of bring that back around, so making that analogy back to smoking. But exercise is just as important too, I'd say.
Great. Hey, Jason, step on up.
Thanks. So, Dr. Bright, you mentioned Fitbit or Apple Watch, and as much as my wife wants me to be, I'm not a watch guy. I just can't stand them. Those of you know, I generally try to not listen to my wife, which doesn't work out well most of the time. I do have recently a pedometer on my phone, which is super cool. What other gadgets or things like that, technology, I'm glued to my smartphone all of the time, that do you recommend that would help?
Yeah, so there are a lot of apps out there that you can use that will help you with it through your phone, so you can use your phone. There are obviously the Fitbits, which are kind of the bracelets that you can use. There's the Apple Watch and other, it doesn't have to be Apple, there are other smartphone-enabled watches out there as well that can incorporate that. And then there's also a lot of services you can subscribe to where you can actually get text messages sending you like a fitness goal for the day. And some actually, I was looking at an email right before we started the presentation today. One of the big healthcare providers in the country is actually demoing that in a small part of the population where they're using these, it actually it connects to your phone, the pedometer does, through Bluetooth, and then you're getting text messages to your phone giving you a fitness goal for the day. Hey, we want to see you do this today. We want to see you get this many steps. We want you to try that. And so there are a lot of different things being developed right now, and it's trying to find what works best for you, because everyone finds that thing that I think that works for them. Do you have any other things you guys use?
That's pretty much it. We sometimes, we have a lot of patients that are used to now not paying anything for medicine, and with times hard, there are a lot of pedometers they may not be quite as accurate as some of the higher price ones we're talking about, but just you can get them for a few bucks and they're very effective. So I think for the masses, that can be a really good thing too.
Can we go back to Jane's question for a second, because she had asked about are other medical professionals on the front lines with this too? Are they prescribing this for their patients? I see that they could very well be, but how many patients are really listening? How many patients in the doctor's office just want the pill? Can I just get a prescription?
Let me ask this. Everyone in here, I'm sure, sees a doctor, the majority. How many of your doctors have talked to you about sitting? So, not a single hand was raised for those who weren't looking. So I think people do want the pill, and I'm not sure that, and I've had people say that before, just give me the pill. I think it takes some narrative, some dialogue with the patient to really reorient them that they're in charge, that this sitting is the new smoking. It's got a negative connotation when the way I see it, it's really positive, because we've been sitting since the beginning of time, and now we know, or at least it's becoming more popularized now, that there's something we can do, we have in our arsenal that we can use that we didn't really know. So I think it's changing that narrative. And yeah, I'm not sure how many docs are talking about it, unfortunately.
Okay. All right. Andy?
Yes, hi, Andy Campbell. I was with some older family over the past weekend, and they lamented on and on about how they were shrinking. And I'm wondering, they're not entirely very active, I think maybe a trip to the grocery store or the kitchen. But is that something that you can make a difference based on what we're talking about, or is it ever too late to maybe start?
Yeah, so, one thing we do see as we age is we can develop some osteoporosis as kind of one risk factor there. And what happens with osteoporosis is that the bones can actually collapse a little bit in our vertebrae. And as they do so, you can kind of start to, you lose some of your adult height and start to even get that kind of bent over posture as some of those vertebrae collapse a little bit. The disc will collapse. And so I think, from osteoporosis standpoint, really the best way to prevent it is when you're 15 and 20 to make sure you reach your peak calcium levels, because as we age, that calcium, the bone density in our body will gradually decline. And so anything we can do to have a higher number to start at, the better off we're going to be when we get older. But there is good literature out there showing that weight-bearing exercise is effective for osteoporosis. So walking, running, those weight-bearing activities can help to slow that process down some.
Can we go back to the research that you were mentioning about children? Because, again, I'm a mom. I've got 2 little kiddos. One's in 3rd, one's in kindergarten, and they're both crazy active. They really are. I can't get on them about that. But I'm thinking about those who aren't and are putting on the weight early in life, and how I feel like it's hard enough for us as adults to make changes in our lives, but when you set kids up like that, what are they facing long term? And we've even seen kids as teenagers with high cholesterol. But I'm thinking, what does that do to the body when they're just 30, by the time they're 20, 30, 40?
Right, and we just sent a 39-year-old for bypass last week who had type 1 diabetes, but we're both seeing, I'm sure, this type 2 diabetes is coming earlier and earlier. And when that happens, your vessels age at twice the rate. So if you develop type 2 diabetes when you're 15, which unfortunately a lot of kids are, by the time you're 40, your vessels are actually 65. So it is a very grim prognosis for that, because that is the way things are moving. But there's also so much positive right now. There's the shared use, that bill just passed, and that's really exciting. So now kids are able to stay at school after class is done and play basketball and do all those crazy activities that they just often need a space to do. I think overall, as humans, we want to move, we're intended to move, and so we have that going for us. We just have to combat the video games and the Kindle, and there's definitely a time and place for it. We just have to bring it back a little bit into moderation.
All right, thank you. All right, I think we can turn it over to Mo.
Okay, guys, I got an idea now. I'm going to go back to the office, and I'm going to start raffling off the chairs in my office. So everybody who doesn't get a raffle ticket is going to have to stand that day. Having you enjoyed today's forum, we encourage all of you to continue the conversation out in the lobby over coffee and cookies. As you know, you can always share and watch our forums on Columbus Television, on WOSU and PBS affiliates throughout the state, and through the Ohio channel, and always on our CMC YouTube channel. We want to thank our sponsors for today, OhioHealth and Mount Carmel Health Systems, and to our speakers, Dr. Sabgir, Dr. Bright, and Ellie Merritt. Thank you so much. With that, we say have a good day. We'll see you next week.